Hello and welcome to Millennial Partners Business Leaders Digital Forum 2020. These episodes will be focusing in on transformative leadership during COVID-19, and I'm happy to welcome our guest, Kashif. Please do introduce yourself.
Good morning, Pearl. So my name is Kashif Khalid. I serve the International Air Transport Association as a regional director for Africa and the Middle East, covering the much coveted portfolio of airports, airlines, passenger facilitation, cargo security.
Thank you. Okay, so here, what was the immediate impact of COVID-19 on your line of work in the business?
Well, I think for the aviation industry, it's no surprise that the onslaught of COVID-19 the impact was extremely great. Airlines were restricted from flying around the world. In addition to that, many governments started shutting borders, passengers were left stranded. And then as a result of that, practically all aviation activity ceased in the months of March, April, May, and even to a great extent the month of June. So it's the onslaught of COVID-19 has had bearings on not only the airlines, but the airports, the entire value chain of aviation, from the travel agents, ground handlers, as well as all service providers that work with the aviation industry, such as the hospitality industry as well.
Of course, it's been hard to escape the impact of COVID-19, but specific industries would have been hit harder than others. So one of the major challenges you have experienced as a result of COVID-19, and how have you overcome this?
So the first challenge that we had for the industry amongst many was to try and help the airlines, airports, and stakeholders not face a liquidity crisis, because it's a very capital intensive business. It's very expensive for airlines to keep aircrafts, make lease payments on them. And then they're also very operationally expensive businesses as well. So most airlines, airports have large workforces that they have to keep employed to manage that movement of traffic. So when traffic ceased, the first challenge that we had was ensuring that there's enough liquidity in the system for the airlines, airports, and people working in the industry. Then with the loss of passenger flights, we still needed to maintain cargo connectivity to provide essential services, equipment, testing kits, personal protective equipment, as well as ventilators across the world. So when passenger flights eroded from the market, it was important that cargo stepped in and ensured that countries were connected to essential goods and services that would have normally flown on passenger flights around the world. So the first thing the industry did was to come together and develop a restart document, shall we say, that was developed by the International Aviation Authority, ICAO, and known as the takeoff or CART takeoff guidance. It set the parameters for all states, governments, and aviation stakeholders to ensure a safe and smooth restart to aviation activity when it's safe to do so. And that has been nurtured by leading global organizations such as ICAO, IATA, and then the Airports Council International as well.
That's good to hear, people coming together during this crisis to try and figure out the best way forward. So what pre-existing attributes enabled you and the company to pull through these trying times?
Well, I mean, for the aviation industry, it's an extremely resilient industry, right? So historically speaking, the industry has seen shocks. Previously, we had the SARS outbreak in 2003, and then our industry has had many external factors as well. For example, 9/11 was a major disruptor for the aviation industry, and the bearings it had on aviation security, as well as ensuring that all flights are safe to fly. But in more recent years, we've had incidents such as terrorism, we've had the financial crisis, but aviation, as we call it within IATA, is the business of freedom. It connects people, goods, to opportunities around the world. And there is no substitute for the industry that we work in. So what we've learned is that our industry is extremely resilient. And when the conditions are right, we firmly believe that we'll see a healthy rebound. It might take a little bit of time, but we'll surely get there.
Okay, and during these times, how is your business leveraging technology to enable perhaps a more remote workflow or automation of critical manual tasks, things of that nature?
Sure. So I think one of the things that we've all learned is that health has become the new passport. If you or I go into the supermarket or a restaurant, our temperatures are taken. On occasions, most of the times we're asked to wear face masks or personal protective equipment. The aviation industry is no different. In fact, now more than ever, there is a focus to reduce the contact and redundant processes that exist within the aviation value chain, shall we say. So if a passenger is traveling, why do we need to have so many manual processes, whether it's at check-in, bag drop, customs, immigration, border control, as well as boarding for your aircraft or plane? There are touch points such as check-in, bag drop, immigration that could be automated using technology such as biometrics, or looking at digital tokens for you to be able to use your mobile or handheld devices to be able to have more control over your passenger journey, and for you to be able to take control of that and not have to come into contact with people. So what it does is, first of all, technology enables you to manage those processes yourselves, whether it's mobile check-in, bag drop, immigration. For those of us that live in the UAE, we're more accustomed to using the electronic gates or smart gates, which really don't need the human interaction. And then even at boarding, there have been trials conducted at airports where just by virtue of you scanning your own handheld device or mobile boarding pass, you're able to board the aircraft without that physical contact. So it creates a more stable, let's say, process, but it also eliminates the contact, which could be a vector for the spread of COVID-19.
Sure, so some exciting steps forward there. And how has the business operating model changed to adjust to the post-COVID-19 environment? You may have touched on some of these points, but again, further to those.
So, I mean, there are many changes that not only the aviation industry, but others are going to see. I think health, as I mentioned, has become the new passport, right? In addition to that, there will be, an added, let's say, focus or oversight on the cleaning and disinfection of surfaces, facilities, and infrastructure. One of the other challenges that the industry has, which is necessary, is to look at the impact social distancing or physical distancing is going to have on your infrastructure. So if you're operating an airport and you're subjecting your passengers to be, 1.5 or 2 meters apart from one another, that reduces your capacity to process more people. So if an airport was processing, in the case of Dubai, for example, let's say 89 million passengers in 2019, if we have to create separation between all of them, even though the restart will take some time, but that does pose some challenges on your infrastructure. You're essentially going to have to process people with those space requirements, which could lead to your facilities being constrained. As well, it could lead to a delay or degradation of service levels. People are used to very fast and efficient processes. So I think that's where one of the challenges is. So physical distancing, but also now at various parts of the journey, passengers will have to be thermally screened with equipment to ensure that they're safe to travel, or as we call them, the multi-layered biosafety approaches. And then there's also the need for passengers and the aviation system to provide more information. So contact tracing is a big part of the journey. Most governments want to know where passengers are coming from. Have they been to countries that have a higher disposition of risk for COVID-19? Have they come into contact with people that could have had symptoms? So you can trace back and isolate people that might pose a risk to your borders. But apart from all of that, I mean, physical distancing, the health measures, temperature screening, but also the mass use of personal protective equipment as well. So not only for the passengers and your stakeholders, but for airlines, airports, even for your own staff and crew members, the retraining and development of your workforce to ensure that they're now applying these new health measures to manage the growth in traffic.
Of course, and it is so interesting to hear of these things. As a frequent flyer myself, um, it's good to get an understanding of what's going behind closed doors to ensure the safety of passengers. And I'm sure that these measures can be transferred and adopted across different environments, different industries as well. So this, common knowledge pool is so vital in this scenario. So in terms of the new measures and compulsions imposed by the market conditions, do you feel this now necessitates a more stringent KPI-driven approach to track metrics?
Absolutely. So for many parts of the process or the industry, there will be a stringent rule of KPIs and metrics, especially around the health and disinfection and cleaning of, let's say, the various touch points or aircraft. So just to give you an example, many operators are now looking at the frequency of how they clean, disinfect airplanes, in addition to common areas at the airports, which could be a vector for the spread of COVID-19. Many organizations are now revisiting their standard operating procedures to ensure that they're building in these additional health measures so that staff as well as stakeholders adhere to the new protocol, shall we say, which is entirely risk-based. So we're going to see some changes. Another element, as I mentioned earlier, was that of temperature screening. So to ensure that every passenger going through your facility or getting on your aircraft has a temperature which is within the acceptable limits or threshold, to ensure that they don't pose a risk to your other guests or staff members. So these multi-layered biosecurity or biosafety measures will have to be built into every part of the aviation industry. Again, we discussed earlier that when you and I walk into a restaurant or a supermarket, we're subjected to that, even though we don't necessarily see it as a cumbersome process. But once you start compounding that over a couple 100,000 passengers that fly every day, as and when the recovery of traffic happens, it will become, not only a tedious process, but it will become a strain on those that operate airlines and airports. So we need to ensure that all of these steps are done in a mutual or globally recognized manner, and that there's minimal disruption with the highest safety and security levels.
Of course, and as you mentioned before, and as I was so happy to hear people coming together to figure out the best way forward, and like you say, to reach a more globalized standard. Okay, so what's on the horizon for you and IATA? Is the company being positioned for growth?
I mean, for us, we lead, represent, and we serve the industry on behalf of our members. So right now, our focus is entirely looking at the challenges that the industry is facing. So we're, responding to that very quickly. But also, I think for us as an organization, our core focus is how do we safely restart the industry, because people haven't been traveling for the last perhaps 4 or 5 months. There's a lot of confusion and ambiguity around in the market. Passenger sentiment has been, hurt. People are apprehensive in terms of taking trips with their family for holidays because they're not sure whether they will be quarantined, whether they have the appropriate PCR tests. Are there any additional costs? What if I get stranded in a foreign country, which happened to many passengers? So there's a lot of apprehension. And I think one of the key areas for us to focus on is to ensure that governments and aviation stakeholders harmonize and provide information to passengers so that we clear this ambiguity, so that passengers can confidently return to traveling when it's safe to do so, and that we help our members, airports, and the associated businesses such as tourism, hospitality, get back to some form of normal given the challenge that we have. I personally think, our industry has been disrupted quite a bit, so there's going to be some adapting that we need to do. And in the absence of a vaccine or a medical solution to COVID-19, we're all going to have to adjust to managing our business with additional preventative measures.
I see. So again, thank you, Kashif, for some really, really interesting insights there. And for people trying to find, reputable sources of information, this is going to be key for passengers, employees, to find comfort in updated news and insights.
No, absolutely. And it's one of the things that we've been working on is to try and sort out the key components of all of the information that is out there, and then provide not only professionals working in the air transport sector, but even passengers, the most relevant, up-to-date, factual information, which can be accessed on our website. So you can get news about visas, borders, openings, as well as quarantine policies of various governments out there. And it will hopefully lead you to make an informed decision for your future journeys.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to a sense of normalcy and stepping on a flight again.
We all
Future
are.
travelers, exactly that. So thank you again, Kashif.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you can find
Here.
more information here at Millennial Partners. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.